not true, and that's not supported by the report. No one in Southern California Gas Company takes responsibility for that. It's an anonymous quote. But the reality is, the Blade report concluded that they failed to follow well integrity regulations, exposing the Porter Ranch and its community to significant risk of well failures. The Blade report went on to say the requirements of testing the annulus every 5 years was not met according to SS25 well records. So they did not follow the regulation. It's not borne out by the evidence in this case. Additionally, they never tried to find out the reasons why they had prior well failures. Prudent refinery operators, when there's a failure, you investigate to find the failure. You need to have a risk assessment plan to make sure that doesn't happen again. But they never did that. Additionally, every witness in this case so far has passed the buck. No one's accepted responsibility. They say, well, somebody else was supposed to do that. Someone else was supposed to do that. Number two, in their report, in their press release, they say, Blade also determined that SoCal Gas's current practices and new state regulations address most, if not all, of the causes identified in the report. And Blade report indicates the industry's leading safety enhancements and new regulations put in place to prevent this type of incident from occurring again. That's not true. They cannot make such a claim. In fact, the Blade report goes on to say that of the 12 recommended fixes or safety regulations, they don't know whether Southern California Gas has complied with 7 of them, more than half. They continue to not provide that information. They concluded that they don't know whether Southern California Gas is implementing 7 of the 12 identified solutions, over half of them. Additionally, they continue their pattern of obfuscation and deflection by refusing to confirm to the authorities whether or not they have implemented these changes to make it safer. So nothing in the Blade reports guarantees at any time that this will never happen again. The root cause analysis was done, and you can see here, the yellow are all the failures that occurred. Additionally, there were 7 attempts to cap the well. 6 of them failed because they did not have an adequate emergency response plan. As we can see, the failures, according to the report, made the leak worse, made more coming out. 111 days it took them. You would expect a large multi-billion-dollar corporation to have a safety plan with all these residents here to protect them. They didn't. They failed dramatically. I'd like to introduce now Patricia Oliver, who's going to talk about some of the safety risks and hazards that the people were exposed to in Southern California. Thank you.
Hi, Patricia Oliver with the Paris firm, PARRIS. From the beginning, the most important question the residents of Porter Ranch have asked is what was in the gas? What was in the gas that came down into their homes? And we now know that they were exposed to gas for decades. And the Blade report does not answer that big question. What was in the gas that had been leaking for decades? Now, their response may be storage gas is clean, but the makes it clear it's also the native gas that was never cleaned. P50A, one of the wells that they knew was leaking for over a decade, contains gas that's never been cleaned. It's not even clean enough to go on a pipeline in the state of California. Standing here today, when my clients ask me what was in the gas, I don't know. Henry Stern, California Senator, SB 463 would be the first step in the right direction to get the information about what is in the gas. The simple reality is individuals like Demetrius Crump are suffering from cancer. His blood counts are so low he can't come out here today. He needs to know what's in the gas so that he can protect his health and his family. And it's time that those big picture questions are answered by SoCal Gas. And make no mistake, SoCal Gas issues a Prop 65 warning, if you look deep on their website, you'll find it somewhere that says it's known to cause cancer and birth defects. And yet that was not the message to any of the people I represent during the blowout. Because during the blowout, what did they say? Natural gas is non-toxic. That's false. We need to peel this onion back and understand what was in the gas once and for all, so that I can answer my clients' questions, so that all of us can answer the questions, so that individuals like Mr. Crump can go to their doctors and get the health care needed.
Thank you, Patricia. Now I'd like to introduce a man who needs no introduction, Steve Cooley. Steve is going to talk about the appeal of the restitution, the Crump case, which is going to be argued on Thursday.
Steve Cooley Associates, former Los Angeles County District Attorney from 2000 to 2012. I'm one of the attorneys, part of the consortium of attorneys trying to bring justice to the residents of Porter Ranch, and it's been a long haul. I can assure you that. This Blade report is very, very timely for Mr. Crump and the other thousands and thousands of victims. What it basically says is what is obvious to any person with common sense at the very beginning. Southern California Gas was negligent or reckless in maintaining those wells, and it caused great harm. Anyone with any common sense would have concluded that at the very beginning of this matter. And we now have this report. It's very timely because what's coming up next is in the Court of Appeal. Mr. Crump's appeal will be heard in the Second Appellate District, and this dates back to the efforts of the lawyers on this case and the victims to seek restitution pursuant to the criminal conviction of the gas company. And we slugged it out, fought it out in the trial court under Marcy's Law, the Victims' Bill of Rights, which mandates restitution when there's a criminal act and there is harm. The trial court denied our effort and the pleas of the victims. We then went to since it was a misdemeanor, we then went to the appellate division of the Superior Court, and they bought into the gas company's lies. We then, the Second Appellate District, then exercised its discretion because this case is so important to take it up on appeal. On Thursday, the legal team we've assembled will be arguing this before the Second District Court of Appeal. There's a lot at stake here, and restitution can be and should be ordered when there is a criminal conviction. It was not done in this case. It's another step in a long process to bring justice in the form of restitution to the many, many, many victims. So I urge the media that's assembled here, continue to follow this case. Follow the arguments made next Thursday in the Second Appellate District. And we'll see if ultimately the system does work and the victims are compensated for the damages done to them, the losses they have suffered because of the negligence and recklessness of Southern California Gas.
Thank you, Steve. I'll now finally Matt, running the Victim Safe Porter Ranch group. Let's talk about how you have the victims.
Yeah, my name is Matt Pacucco, president.
Ready to spell your last name?
Pacucco, P-A-K-U-C-K-O. President and co-founder of Safe Porter Ranch, a 501c3 citizens group that we started 5 years ago before the blowout. Now, Governor Newsom, if this isn't your cue to shut this facility down, I don't know what is. The culture of negligence is profound and spelled out in great detail. For decades, no regulation is going to make the San Fernando Valley safe from SoCal Gas. In fact, the SB 380 so-called overhaul of that facility, Dogger, the regulator, certified that facility safe January of 2017. They switched it on. 33% of their wells that were certified safe failed within 2 weeks. That's documented. January of this year, SoCal Gas, again, didn't inspect something because they found corrosion where they had to shut down about 1/3 of the capacity of their facility. That's this year. That's with the new regulations. Yeah, no regulations are going to make us safe. We're more uneasy now living in our homes, knowing in great detail what this company is capable of and how often they can fail for so long and not do a damn thing about it. We don't know what harm's going to come to us from that facility like any day now. There's been plenty of leaks since they shut it down, documented already. But the scariest thing for the rest of Los Angeles, SoCal Gas has 2 other such facilities that have not had this kind of scrutiny that are much older than this one. And pipelines underneath all of your homes. That's the real scary part. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, now we'll open it up to questions. Just if you identify yourself. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Andrew Mullenbeck from KFI. Following this report, what, if any, impact does it have on the lawsuits that are pending?
Well, I think the report crystallizes for everyone what happened, what information we were unable to obtain from SoCal Gas and Discovery in this case. We've been battling it for 4 years. We have now a new judge on the case. She's taken over. She's trying to move the case, set it for trial. We have a hearing on Thursday morning. She's working on the trial plan, and we think this report, it just re-emphasizes everything we already knew. We didn't know, though, that they had 60 prior failures that weren't addressed or investigated. And there are other information that we learned. I think the videotape, the 5-minute videotape that they prepared, really lays out the case pretty simply.
So do you think it will have an impact on the claim of negligence?
Yes, but I think it's a much higher level of action. I think it's gross negligence, almost intentional, that this is just a Russian roulette. They're playing with everybody's lives,
Right.
and eventually there's going to be a bullet in the chamber, and that they're not caring about the consequences. Yes, sir.
Joshua Milrad. I'm up here looking at houses right now for my family. I'm wondering what the current state of safety would be.
Well, we're working on that. We don't think they can guarantee this will never happen again. We believe there's a permanent nuisance that's been created that is affecting the values of homes. That the only way that it would be guaranteed if they didn't operate the well.
What are the odds that this could get shut down, this facility?
You know, you got to deal with the regulators and the government, and despite Mr. Cooley, who would enforce the law, it's going to be difficult, I think. It's a big profit center for Southern California Gas. They have a huge lobby group lobbying to prevent that. So we're not encouraged by that at this time.
And you indicated that in SoCal Gas's press release, they claim that they were following regulations at the time in 2015. Do you actually dispute that portion? Do you find that they were in violation of
Yes.
existing regulations?
Yes, they weren't conducting inspections like they're supposed to.
That's required?
Yes. There were many other things that they didn't follow. And the report is, 300 pages of all these problems. And look at all the failures that occurred. And what's interesting about the press release is they make everything in quotes, but nobody is attributed to the quote. Who is it? Let's see someone from Southern California Gas come out here. Because when we get to trial, we're going to have an opportunity to cross-examine that person. And they're going to have to answer the questions in front of 12 jurors in the Los Angeles Superior Court. And it's all going to come out. And the lawyers here, we have a great team of lawyers working. We're working in the appellate avenue. We're working in the trial court. And we're not going to stop until justice is rendered for the residents.
Brian, you said there's a hearing on Thursday for the trial case. Where's that going to be held?
That is going to be in the Superior Court in front of Judge Kuhl, Kuhl. She's now the complex judge in charge of the case. She is now looking at the options on how to try the case. Keep in mind, there are 38,000 people that have brought claims. She can't try all the cases together, but she's trying to figure out the best way to get a good sampling of the cases tried and to get this case moving.
Could Mr. Cooley also speak to, what some of the arguments are going to be on Thursday with the appellate case?
Well, the arguments are that Marsy's Law is in our Constitution, passed by the voters, and that mandates restitution be made when there's a criminal act and there's some harm done to some victim. In this case, we assert that the trial judge, because of the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office and Southern California Gas's lawyer, structured a plea to allow a plea to one criminal count that they claim does not relate directly to the harm done. The primary argument that's going to be made is that the count to which they pled is transaction related to the other three criminal counts that directly related to the harm done. It's somewhat of a nuanced argument, but we feel our position, the victim's position, in terms of what happened to them, is well taken. And no carefully structured case settlement so they can argue that, oh, no restitution is owed because of this particular very narrow account that was pled to, we don't think makes sense given the big picture. It's time for Southern California Gas to own up. And they can own up in the civil courts, and they should own up in the criminal courts where the law mandates restitution for victims when there's provable harm. And there's no doubt in this case there's provable harm.
Mr. Cooley, do you directly blame Jackie Lacey, the DA, for allowing the no contest plea in those criminal charges? And what do you think should be the restitution in that plea?
It's not so much the no contest plea, because that would not impact the application of Marcy's Law. If there's any villain in the piece here in terms of how the victims were not afforded restitution because of the criminal case, there are many players. The very smart, clever attorneys representing Southern California Gas played a big role. There were other individuals who would prefer that the more efficient system of restitution pursuant to a criminal conviction not be used. And I think that the District Attorney's Office failed in the fundamental obligation to uphold the victim's rights. The various attorneys on behalf of the victims were excluded from that process, which I think did not allow the trial court to fully evaluate how the trial court could have and should have ordered restitution pursuant to Marcy's Law. Now this is going to be a case of kind of first impression, and we look forward to the arguments Thursday in the Second District Court of Appeal, and we think we'll win the day.
And what amounts are you looking at?
Pardon me?
What amounts for restitution should be ordered here?
I've heard numbers up to $2 billion.
Just to clarify, we're going to have to prove that. They're just not going to hand over the money. The victims are going to have to go and prove what their losses are. So that's still going to require proof.
Restitution is ordered hundreds of times every single day when it comes to criminal cases and provable harm to a victim. Now granted, this is on a scale of biblical proportions, but there's ways to address that. You can have special monitors appointed, other mechanisms so that the restitution claims can be processed eventually. Just because it's a big challenge doesn't mean that the District Attorney's Office and the courts should rise to the occasion and do their duty under the law.
One other for Patricia Oliver. Could you talk a little bit about the difference between the gas that came out of SS-25 and the longer lasting, more pervasive leak that you're talking about with that other well?
Sure. So SS-25 stores gas that's brought in through pipelines and injected underground. It's been cleaned several times before it gets here, but we don't even know the gas composition, frankly, of SS-25 gas. Sitting here today, when we know that the Department of Public Health found chemicals like acrolein and metals like barium in homes, we don't know what was in the gas that came out of SS25 that might have brought those chemicals into the home, because we don't have that information. But what complicates it from the long-term health exposures is that there were dozens of wells leaking for the decades before SS25. And some of those wells are old oil wells or new wells that have been drilled that have gas and oil native to the facility. So when they leak, they're going to leak gas that has never been cleaned. So you're going to have massively higher levels of benzene. You're going to have massively higher levels of toluene. And that's going to be the kinds of things you see in those wells that leak where it's native to the area and not being plugged or controlled.
Steve, can you tell me what, tell us please, what Mr. Crump's first name is and what type of cancer he has and when was first diagnosis?
Oh, I can answer that.
Oh, okay.
This is Demetrius Crump, and he is the first name defendant, but on behalf of literally thousands of others.
Mr. Crump has esophageal cancer he's been battling. He has lived in Porter Ranch, I believe, since about 2004 or 5, and has been exposed to untold numbers of chemicals. He does not have any of the reasons that you would associate with his cancer as part of his lifestyle or his genetics. So the doctors have never been able to figure out why he got that cancer.
And how long, what was first diagnosed?
I believe he was first diagnosed in mid-2015 before the blowout happened. He would have been exposed from the prior emissions from the old compressors as well as the leaks from the old wells.
And Brian, it looks like you're looking at two fronts here. First of all, restitution for the people. Secondly, you want to shut this place down. Do you honestly expect that will ever happen?
I can't really speculate on that. I'm keeping faith and hope, but I don't know. But look, this is just a picture here on page 43 that shows the level of the corrosion that existed. This doesn't happen overnight. This was years and years of failures to allow something to get to that.
But if the goal isn't to get it shut down, wouldn't the problem be ongoing? And
that's our claim, that there is a permanent nuisance that exists, and then but for that no one's going to be able to have a nice life here. There's always the threat or the risk of another blowout, and no one can guarantee, despite what SoCal Gas says, that it's not going to happen again. That's why there's a permanent nuisance. The only way to fix it is to shut it down.
And is that what you're seeking in that trial?
Well, no, we're not probably, that's not some relief that we can get in court. So we're going to have to seek compensation to compensate the people for what they've lost. And we're still working with the judge to determine how the trial is going to look. Because obviously, with 38,000 people, they can't all go at the same time. And the judge is trying to balance it and figure out what's the best, most efficient, fair way to do the trial.